The Sting of Wool. The invitation to my stepmother's 50th birthday gala was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Gold foil on cream cardstock. It arrived in my dingy apartment mailbox, smelling of Lisbeth's favorite peony scent. The address was The Veld, the most exclusive new venue in the city, a soaring glass-walled event space built in a reclaimed warehouse, famous for its brutalist chic and its impenetrable wait list. It was a subtle, elegant reminder. This is the world we inhabit. Look where you are. My father, Charles, had added a sticky note in his looping, hesitant script. "Hope you can make it, Leo. It would mean a lot to her." Black tie, of course. Of course, because my one passable suit, bought for a friend's funeral 2 years ago, would scream charity case next to their Brioni and Gucci. I stared at the invitation, the past rising in my throat like bile. 7 years. 7 years since my mother's quiet death from a swift, vicious cancer. A year later, Charles had married Lisbeth, a woman whose warmth was as meticulously applied as her lipstick. She brought with her a daughter, my now step-cousin, Elise, a viper in designer silk. To them, I was Leo, the awkward, grieving son who'd failed to transition gracefully into their glossy new unit. I was the one who'd dropped out of the business degree Charles had funded, who worked as a freelance graphic designer from a cramped apartment that smelled of old takeout and defeat. I was the smudge on their perfect portrait, the stinky little sheep who'd wandered away from the flock and gotten lost in the brambles. They didn't know about the Veld. They couldn't. I'd bought the derelict warehouse 2 years ago with the last of my mother's inheritance, a secret she'd left for me alone, a trust that activated when I turned 25. It wasn't a fortune, but it was vision fuel. I saw the raw potential in the crumbling brick and rusted beams. I'd poured every penny, every ounce of my grief and anger into it, working with an architect under a shell company, L&M Holdings. L for Lillian, my mother, M for me. To the world, especially my family, I was still Leo the loser. But in the city's burgeoning elite circles, L&M Holdings was a whispered name, a mysterious player with impeccable taste. The Veld was my sanctuary and my revenge, long before I knew I'd need one. And now, they were throwing a party there. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. I hadn't decided if I was going, but the universe, it seemed, had an exquisite sense of irony. The night of the party, I stood before my foggy bathroom mirror. The funeral suit hung a little loose now. I'd lost weight. I'd had it cleaned, but there was a permanent faint sheen on the elbows. I looked exactly like what they expected. Down at heel, a little pathetic. Perfect. I took the subway, another small rebellion. Let them arrive in black cars. Let them float in on a cloud of entitlement. I would emerge from the underground, smelling of damp concrete and determination. The transformed warehouse district glittered in the autumn twilight. The Veld was a jewel box of light at the end of the block. Its name was spelled out in minimalist steel letters above the entrance. Valets whisked away Range Rovers and Teslas. A crowd of beautiful people in black swarmed the entrance, laughter sharp as broken glass. I approached, my heart a steady, deliberate drumbeat. I saw them immediately, holding court just inside the vast glass doors. Charles, looking older, his arm possessively around Lisbeth's slender waist. She was resplendent in a column of ice blue silk, her blonde hair a perfect helmet. And beside them, Elise. Elise was the family's glittering weapon, 24, with our shared father's sharp cheekbones but her mother's cold green eyes. She was a social media influencer whose influence extended to making everyone around her feel insufficient. Tonight, she was a vision of emerald green, a dress that seemed painted on, her lips a matching slash of crimson. She was whispering to a cluster of her friends, her gaze scanning the room like a hunter. I took a breath, smoothed my worn lapels, and walked through the doors. The interior was breathtaking, even to me. 3 stories of raw space, crisscrossed by industrial gantries now strung with thousands of tiny lights. A living wall of ferns dominated one end. The bar was a single 20-foot slab of reclaimed black walnut. The floor was polished concrete, gleaming under the constellations above. It was everything I'd dreamed, a cathedral of cool, uncompromising beauty. I moved through the crowd, invisible in my anonymity. I saw their eyes slide over me, dismissing me as staff or a +1 from the wrong side of the family. I heard the snippets of conversation. Lisbeth looks amazing. Charles spared no expense. The Veld is impossible to book. How did he... I finally reached the inner circle. Charles saw me first. His face did a complicated dance, a flicker of paternal affection quickly smothered by social anxiety and a wince at my suit. "Leo, you made it." He pulled me into a stiff, brief hug that smelled of his usual cologne and new money. Lisbeth turned, her smile a professional-grade beam that didn't reach her eyes. "Leo, darling, you came." She offered a cheek, which I brushed with my lips. The peony scent was overpowering. "You look very yourself." And then, Elise. She finished her sentence to her friends, then slowly, deliberately turned her gaze on me. Her eyes traveled from my scuffed shoes up to my tired face. A smirk, tiny and vicious, played on her red lips. She leaned in, close enough for only me and her entourage to hear, her voice a sugar-coated dart. Well, well, look everyone. The stinky little sheep has finally found his way back to the pen. I hope you didn't take the bus, Leo. The smell might clash with the champagne. Her friends tittered, a brittle, cruel sound. One of them, a guy with overly gelled hair, snorted into his drink. The old Leo would have flushed, stammered, shrunk into himself. The Leo who'd buried his mother and watched his father replace her with a mannequin. The sting was immediate, hot, and familiar, but beneath it, something new stirred, a cold, calm certainty. I met her gaze. I didn't smile, I didn't frown, I just looked at her, letting her words hang in the air between us. Nice to see you too, Lise. The venue is beautiful, isn't it? She blinked, thrown by the lack of reaction. She expected a flinch, not a bland observation about architecture. I suppose, she sniffed, recovering. Daddy had to call in so many favors. You wouldn't understand the logistics. No, I said quietly, my eyes scanning the soaring ceiling, the intricate lighting rig I'd personally approved. I suppose I wouldn't. I excused myself and melted back into the crowd, leaving a faint ripple of confusion in my wake. I went to the bar, ordered a club soda with lime. From my vantage point, I watched them. Lisbeth preening, accepting compliments on the party she had orchestrated in my space. Charles looking proudly at the crowd, believing his wealth and connections had secured this coup. Elise already back to holding court, shooting the occasional contemptuous glance my way. The fury was there, a solid cold weight in my stomach, but it was useful now. It was fuel. I took out the cheap prepaid phone I'd bought for the evening and sent a single pre-drafted text to a number labeled M Site Manager. Guest of Honor Group is center floor, near the living wall. The one in emerald green is particularly invested in the ambiance. Ensure the service is impeccable. Then, at my signal, pull the thread. A reply came instantly. Understood. The stage is set. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The stage was more than metaphorical. The entire evening was a meticulously crafted production, and they were the unwitting stars. The over-the-top floral arrangements Lisbeth had demanded, charged at a 400% markup, billed directly to Charles's business account. The exclusive champagne she had insisted on, a mid-tier brand relabeled at a 3 times price. The famous jazz quartet she had discovered, booked through my holding company at a standard rate, with a clause that 50% of their fee was a kickback to L&M for the exposure. Every one of Lisbeth's extravagant choices, every one of Charles's proud boasts about pulling strings, had been funneled through me. They were paying a fortune to celebrate in a building I owned, enriching me with their own vanity. But that was just the financial sting. The real lesson was yet to come. The speeches began. Charles took the microphone, his voice wavering with emotion. He spoke of Lisbeth's grace, her beauty, how she'd brought light back into their lives. He didn't mention my mother, not a syllable. The crowd applauded. Lisbeth dabbed at non-existent tears. Then Elise floated up. She took the mic, a vision of filial devotion. To my amazing mom, she gushed, her voice dripping with practiced sincerity. And to my wonderful stepdad Charles for making all this possible. The roar that followed my declaration wasn't one of applause. It was the sound of 100 socialites and business associates recalibrating their reality in real time. The buzz was a physical thing, a swarm of incredulous whispers and sharp, excited glances. All the attention, the adoration that had been laser-focused on Lisbeth and Charles moments before, now swung to me with the force of a wrecking ball. I stood perfectly still in the eye of the hurricane, my cheap suit feeling not like a costume of poverty, but like a uniform of ascetic power. I didn't need Brioni. I was the Velt. Charles's face had moved from pale to a mottled purplish red. Leo, he choked out, the word a strained whisper lost in the noise. What is this? Lisbeth was faster. Humiliation had ignited into a cold, contained fury. She stepped forward, her ice-blue silk hissing. This is a tasteless joke, she announced, her voice cutting through the chatter with the precision of a scalpel. She was addressing the room, not me. A pathetic attempt at attention from a boy who's never understood how to be part of a family. Some digital prank. She waved a dismissive hand at the screen, her diamond bracelet flashing like a distress signal. Elise said nothing. She was a statue in emerald, her eyes locked on mine. The hatred was still there, but it had been joined by something else, a frantic, calculating intelligence. She was scanning me, the room, the screen, trying to find the flaw, the loophole, the way to twist this back in her favor. She was her mother's daughter. I didn't argue with Lisbeth. I simply reached into the inner pocket of my worn suit jacket and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. I unfolded it slowly, the sound crisp in the hushed room. It was a notarized copy of the property deed, the same one on the screen. I walked the few steps to Charles and held it to him. His hand trembled as he took it. He fumbled for his reading glasses, perched them on his nose. He read in silence, his lips moving slightly. I watched as the last vestige of paternal confusion evaporated, replaced by the stark, cold understanding of a businessman who has just discovered a hostile takeover of his own life. He looked from the paper to me, his eyes wide with a betrayal so profound it bordered on awe. L&M Holdings, he whispered. L for Lillian, I said, my voice quiet but carrying. My mother, the trust she left for me, the one you didn't know about. The blow landed visibly. Charles flinched as if struck. My mother's name, her final act of love and foresight, was a weapon he'd never seen coming. It was the truth, and it was unforgivable. Lisbeth snatched the paper from his limp hands. Her eyes scanned it, her perfect composure cracking at the edges. "This proves nothing. A piece of paper. This is fraud. You've forged documents to embarrass us." Her voice was rising, losing its cultivated calm. "The city assessor's office is closed, but the records are public. They'll confirm it tomorrow. As for the invoices on the screen," I gestured with my chin toward the bar. "Mario, the manager, he can pull the physical files from the office. The contracts are all signed by your event planner, Lisbeth, approved by you. The payments were processed to L&M accounts." As if on cue, Mario, a tall, impeccably dressed man with a calm demeanor, emerged from behind the bar. He gave me a slight professional nod, then addressed the room. "If any guests have questions about the venue's ownership or the evening's arrangements, I am happy to provide verified documentation." His voice was a soothing counterpoint to the chaos. He was my planted flag of legitimacy. The crowd's murmur shifted. The initial shock was curdling into something darker, more delicious: schadenfreude. The Sterlings, they used Lisbeth's maiden name socially, a fact that had always chafed at Charles, had not just been humiliated, they were exposed as frauds themselves. They'd been boasting about their connections, their exclusive coup, while literally paying tribute to the family outcast they despised. Elise finally moved. She didn't go to her mother or stepfather. She took 2 graceful steps toward me, closing the distance. Up close, I could see the fine tremor in her hands, the pulse beating wildly in her throat, but her voice, when it came, was low, controlled, and venomous. "You think you're clever," she breathed, the words for me alone. "You think this is winning? You're a petty, bitter little man who just burned the last bridge he had. You have no family now, no one, just this cold, empty warehouse." Her green eyes gleamed with malicious insight. "And you're still just Leo, a sad boy playing king for a night." Her words were meant to be the final psychic stab, to reduce my nuclear attack to a pathetic tantrum, and a part of me, the old bruised part, felt the truth in it. This was a bridge burned. There would be no coming back from this. But the new part, the part that had poured concrete and negotiated steel contracts, looked back at her with absolute serenity. "You're right, Elise. I am just Leo. But Leo owns the warehouse, and as of tonight, your family's financial credibility is a joke whispered about at parties like this one. Your mother's taste is a spreadsheet of overpayments. Your stepfather's business acumen is a question mark. And you," I let my gaze sweep over her emerald dress, "you're the influencer who couldn't influence her way out of a paper bag her own family was buying at a 400% markup." Her control shattered. A raw animal sound escaped her lips. She took a half step back, as if my words were physical blows. The spectacle was becoming uncomfortable for the guests. The thrill of scandal was giving way to the awkwardness of being trapped in someone else's family meltdown. People began to drift toward the exits, coats held tight, conversations now urgent and excited about the drama they had witnessed. The party was over. Charles seemed to collapse in on himself. He was staring at the polished concrete floor as if it held the answers. Lisbeth was hissing instructions at a terrified-looking event planner, demanding lawyers, demanding retractions. It was a frantic, futile rear-guard action. Mario appeared at my elbow. "Sir, the press is starting to call. A tip line was apparently activated, and several guests have already posted on social media." I had expected this. The tip to a society gossip columnist was my final pre-party move. The headline practically wrote itself. "Philanthropist's lavish birthday bash at venue secretly owned by estranged stepson." I released the prepared statement from L&M Holdings. No further comment tonight. I turned to leave. I had done what I came to do. The unraveling was now self-sustaining. "Leo." It was Charles. His voice was a broken thing. He had stepped away from Lisbeth's vortex of fury. He looked old and terribly small. "Why?" The single word held a universe of pain, not just for tonight, but for the years of silence, the missed connections, the replacement family. I looked at my father, the man who'd given up on me when I became inconvenient, when my grief didn't match his new narrative. For a moment, the cold engine of my vengeance sputtered. This was the man who taught me to ride a bike, who sat with me through Star Wars marathons. But he was also the man who let Elise call me a stinky sheep, who allowed Lisbeth to erase my mother's memory from their home, who looked at my life and saw nothing but failure. "You never asked what I was building, Dad," I said, the familial title feeling strange on my tongue. "You only saw what I wasn't. Tonight, you finally get to see." I walked away from him, leaving him standing amid the ruins of his wife's party. I didn't look back at Elise's hate-filled glare or Lisbeth's furious plotting. The cold night air outside was a shock, cleansing. The valets were gone, the street almost empty. I pulled my thin coat around me and started the long walk to the subway. The high of the confrontation began to ebb, replaced by a profound, hollow exhaustion. Elise's words echoed in the quiet of my own mind. "You have no family now, no one, just this cold, empty warehouse." She was right. The vengeance was complete, but it was a desert victory. I had traded the toxic, conditional belonging of their world for a vast, echoing solitude. The Veld was a masterpiece, but it wasn't a home. It was a monument, a tomb for my old life, and a very cold throne for my new one. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Not Mario, a number I didn't recognize. A text. Unknown. That was the most spectacularly unhinged thing I've ever seen, and I was at the Met Gala when the peacock costume caught fire. We need to talk, not about them, about you, and what you've built. 10 a.m. tomorrow, the coffee shop on 5th and Granville. Don't bring your own drama. I have enough. I stared at the message. The tone was arrogant, perceptive, and utterly intriguing. It wasn't someone from the family circle. The reference to the Met Gala peacock incident, a legendary insider bit of insider trivia, suggested someone from a different echelon of wealth and society entirely. Someone who saw the spectacle not just as family drama, but as theater or strategy. A flicker of something, curiosity, a challenge cut through the numbness. The game wasn't over. It had just changed boards. The stinky little sheep had roared, and a new unknown player had taken note. I looked back at the Velt, glowing like a lantern in the dark warehouse district. The coffee shop on 5th and Granville was the kind of place that sold artisanal air and charged $8 for it. Reclaimed wood, exposed Edison bulbs, the gentle roar of a professional-grade espresso machine. It was a temple to curated authenticity, a far cry from the diner grease and vinyl of Dot's world, a world that felt like a lifetime and a parallel universe away. I'd spent the night in the empty, echoing expanse of the Velt's office, staring at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling glass, feeling neither triumph nor despair, just a vast operational stillness. I arrived at 9:55, wearing the same funeral suit. It felt like a uniform now, my declaration of war. I ordered a black coffee, not because I wanted it, but because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and sat at a small table in the back. At 10 o'clock on the dot, she walked in. She moved with an authority that made the room subtly reorient itself, not with the floating grace of Ava Sterling or the predatory glide of Elise, but with the crisp, assured stride of someone who owned the ground beneath her feet. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, dressed in a severely tailored charcoal pantsuit, her dark hair cut in a sharp chin-length bob. She wore no visible jewelry except for a simple, brutalist platinum watch. Her face was all intelligent angles, her eyes a pale, disconcerting gray that scanned the room and landed on me without a hint of doubt. She didn't approach. She went to the counter, ordered something in a quiet voice, and then came to my table. She didn't ask if she could sit. She simply placed her ceramic cup, containing what looked like hot water with a slice of lemon, on the table and took the chair opposite me. "Leo," she said. Not a question, a statement. "And you are?" "Catherine Thorne." She let the name hang. It meant nothing to me, but she said it with the expectation that it should. When I didn't react, a flicker of something, perhaps amusement, touched her lips. Julian's older, smarter, and considerably less indicted sister. The connection snapped into place with an electric jolt. Julian Thorne, the art consultant, the middleman in the Sterling Antiquities scheme, the one whose LinkedIn request had been the first thread I'd pulled, leading to my own ruinous salvation. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a new player. This was a consequence. "I have nothing to say about that," I said, my voice flat. "And if this is some kind of—" "Relax," she interrupted, her tone dry. "I'm not here about Julian's pathetic grifts or your spirited testimony against the Sterlings. Frankly, my brother is an idiot with a good eye and terrible judgment. He's where he belongs. I'm here about you and the Velt." She took a sip of her hot water, watching me over the rim of the cup. "I own the building 2 blocks over, the one they're converting into the Astra Gallery. I've been watching your project take shape for 18 months. The quality of the restoration, the daring of the design, the silence around the ownership. It was either a masterpiece of money laundering or the work of a genuine obsessive visionary. Last night clarified which." "I'm not looking for investors," I said, the defensive wall slamming up. "I'm not offering investment. I'm offering an alliance." She set her cup down with a precise click. "You have a space, but no sustainable ecosystem. You just humiliated one of the few social circles that could fill it with the right kind of clientele. The old money crowd you scalded last night will blacklist you. The new money crowd sees you as a fascinating grenade, but they won't book their daughter's wedding someplace with that much dramatic residue. You're a spectacle, Leo, not a business." Her words were brutal, clinical, and undeniably true. The hollow victory of last night yawned wider. "So what's your proposal? You teach me etiquette and lend me your guest list?" "Don't be tedious," she said, a hint of impatience in her voice. "I propose we change the game. The Velt shouldn't be a party venue for people like your stepmother. It should be a cultural engine, a forge for reputation. You have the canvas, I have the paint, the patrons, and the protection." "Protection from what?" "From the kind of quiet, legal strangling Robert Sterling would have deployed if he had time. From the whispers that will now call your success a fluke, your money suspicious. From the city inspectors who might suddenly find concerns about your occupancy permits." She leaned forward slightly. "You declared war in a very loud, very public way. You won the first battle. You are now exposed in the open field. You need a fortress." I stared at her. She was offering a lifeline, but it came from the same ocean that had spawned the sharks I'd just escaped. The Thorns were clearly a different breed, colder, sharper, more intellectual than the Sterling's brutish social climbing, but they were predators nonetheless. "Why?" I asked. What do you get out of it? 3 things, she said, ticking them off on fingers with perfectly manicured, unpolished nails. 1, I get a stunning venue to program with the artists I represent, elevating their work and my own standing. 2, I get to stick a very elegant thumb in the eye of the sterling adjacent social set I've always found vulgar. And 3, she paused, her gray eyes locking on mine, I get you. I'm not for sale. Not for sale, for development. You have a raw, vengeful talent. You built a beautiful weapon. I can teach you how to build an empire, how to turn that anger into infrastructure, how to be more than just the boy who blew up his own family. It was the most compelling and terrifying offer I'd ever received. She saw past the stunt to the structure. She recognized the architect in the anarchist. I need to think, I said, the phrase feeling weak. You have 48 hours, she said, standing up. She left her half-finished hot water on the table. My card is under the saucer. The offer is clear, and it is final. Build with me, or watch what you've built become a very expensive, very empty monument to a single night's satisfaction. She walked out, leaving behind the scent of citrus and frost. I sat there for a long time, the noise of the coffee shop receding. Catherine Thorne was right. I was exposed. The adrenaline of the reveal had gone, leaving only the logistical and social fallout. I'd proven a point, but I hadn't built a future. My phone buzzed. This time it was a number I knew. My lawyer, Alan, a no-nonsense man I'd hired with L&M funds. Leo, it started. Charles's company, Sterling Capital, just had its line of credit with First Metropolitan under review. The gossip columns are brutal. Lisbeth's charity board chairmanship is being re-evaluated. And Elise, he paused, she's lawyered up. She's claiming emotional distress, defamation. It's nonsense, but it's a nuisance suit designed to tie you up and bleed you with legal fees. Elise, of course. She wouldn't go down squeaking, she'd go down litigating, a paper-cut war of attrition. Handle it, I said, my voice tired. Use the firm. Spare no expense. I want it crushed quickly and publicly. It'll be expensive, Alan warned. I have the money. The words felt strange. I did have money. The Velt was profitable, but it was also a target now. After the call, I picked up Catherine Thorne's card. Heavy cardstock. Just a name and a number. No title, no company. The ultimate power play. If you needed to know who she was, you weren't worth her time. I left the coffee shop and walked. I walked through the shiny downtown, through the fading gentrified neighborhoods, and finally into the grittier warehouse district where the Velt stood. My kingdom. Mario was inside, overseeing a cleanup crew. The living wall looked tired. The polished concrete was scuffed with 100 heel marks. The space felt used, violated by the previous night's drama. Sir, Mario said, approaching, we've had 17 cancellations for future events, 3 inquiries from journalists, and 1 very persistent process server looking for you. I had him removed. The unraveling was accelerating. Catherine Thorne's prediction was manifesting by the hour. I climbed the steel staircase to the office, the one with the glass wall overlooking the floor. I sat in my chair, the one I'd bought from a defunct architecture firm. I looked at Catherine's card on the desk. An alliance with a thorn. It felt like a deal with a more sophisticated, more dangerous devil. But what was the alternative? A slow death by 1,000 cuts? Legal, financial, social, administered by the Sterlings and the ecosystem they'd poisoned against me? I thought of my mother, not the sick, fading woman, but the vibrant artist she'd been. She'd loved beautiful spaces, bold ideas. She'd left me the money not for revenge, but for creation. Had I honored that, or had I used her legacy as a cudgel? The Velt could be more than a weapon. Catherine, for all her glacial calculation, had seen that. She saw the potential for a cultural engine, a legacy my mother might have been proud of. But it meant stepping onto another gilded chessboard. It meant trading the week between the dinner and my scheduled flight to Zurich was a study in psychological bifurcation. I lived 2 lives. The first was the one I showed Dot and Dave, a man slightly preoccupied with work, maybe a little tired, but fundamentally unchanged. I ate Dot's chili. I joked with Gus about the Patriots' sorry prospects. I listened to Dave grumble about a supplier. I performed normalcy with an actor's dedication, the Sterling's cold library a sealed chamber in my mind. The second life was lived in the shadows of that chamber. It was a life of quiet, furious research, conducted on library computers and in the privacy of my apartment with the blinds drawn. I learned about UNESCO conventions on cultural property. I memorized the specific penalties under U.S. law for smuggling antiquities. I studied the labyrinthine world of free ports, those tax-neutral, secrecy-shrouded warehouses where the ultra-wealthy stored everything from gold bars to old masters, no questions asked. I read about Interpol's stolen art division. I wasn't planning to be a good smuggler. I was planning to be a catastrophic one. My plan was simple in concept, exquisitely dangerous in execution. I would follow the Sterling's instructions to the letter, up to a point. I would go to Zurich, I would retrieve the crates, but I would not take them to Dubai. Instead, I would redirect them. I would deliver them not to a waiting sheik, but to the one place the Sterlings would never expect and could never control, the authorities. specifically to the Cultural Heritage Protection Unit of the Swiss Federal Office of Culture, with a carbon copy to the FBI's art crime team. It was a suicide mission. I would be admitting to international smuggling. I would be implicating myself to avoid prison in 2 countries. My only hope was a plea deal, my testimony and the physical evidence of the artifacts in exchange for immunity and for the full, crushing weight of the law to come down on Robert, Diana, and most especially, Ava. I would trade my freedom for theirs, and I would use the Sterling's own money, the $2 million fee, to fund the world's most expensive act of self-immolation, hiring the best international lawyer I could find to negotiate the terms of my surrender. It was a Hail Mary pass thrown from my own end zone. The odds of it working were microscopic. The odds of me spending the next decade in a foreign prison were overwhelming. But it was the only move I had that protected Dave. If I was the cooperating witness who brought down a smuggling ring, the Sterlings would be in no position to touch him. Their empire would be too busy collapsing. The night before my flight, I sat with Dot on her couch. She was flipping through a catalog for new diner booths. "You're quiet," she said, not looking up. "Just thinking about work," I said, the lie a physical ache. She put the catalog down and looked at me. Her gaze was direct, unsettling. "This thing with Gus's brother's boat, it's taking a lot out of you. It's a tricky job." She didn't believe me. I could see the doubt in her eyes, the concern she was too smart to voice. She knew I was hiding something, but she trusted me enough, or loved me enough, to not pry. It was the worst feeling in the world. "Just be careful, okay? I know you think you're indestructible under a hood, but the ocean's different." I took her hand, rough and warm. "I'll be careful, I promise." The promise was another lie. I was walking into a storm, and careful was no longer an option. Zurich was a city of crisp, clean lines and discreet, staggering wealth. The cafe where I was to meet my contact was in the old town, all cobblestones and whispering fountains. My contact was a pale, nervous man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit. He said his name was Klaus. He didn't make small talk. He slid a key and a slip of paper with a 9-digit alphanumeric code across the table, along with a ticket for a secure locker at the Hauptbahnhof. "The instructions for the charter are in the locker. Flight is tomorrow at 10 a.m. from Zurich Airport, private terminal. Be on it." He left without touching his espresso. The Freeport was a featureless modern fortress on the outskirts of the city. Inside, it was a temple of silence and security. My key and code granted me access to a specific aisle in a vast, humming warehouse. My footsteps echoed in the sterile chill. I found the locker, a massive brushed steel door. Using the key and code, I opened it. Inside were 2 unassuming wooden crates, each about the size of a small suitcase. They were stenciled with meaningless numbers. They felt heavier than they looked, the weight of history, of crime, of my potential future. This was the point of no return. Taking possession was the crime. I loaded them onto a waiting dolly and wheeled them out. A prearranged van was waiting. The driver took me to an anonymous upmarket hotel. The crates sat in the middle of my room, inert yet screaming. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside, the spiritual heritage of a culture, reduced to a commodity, a bargaining chip in the Sterling power play. I spent the night staring at those crates. I thought of Dave's hands on an engine block, of Dot's laugh, of the smell of my apartment, the life I was about to throw away. The fear was a living thing, coiling in my chest, cold and slick. This wasn't the clean pain Robert had mentioned. This was a dirty, terrifying, possibly futile agony. But I thought of Ava's triumphant smile in the library, of Robert's cold assessment of Dave's life as economic fragility, of Diana's predatory gaze. They had to be stopped. Not just for me, but because people like them never stopped. They would find another Mark, another Dave, another set of crates. The game would continue. At dawn, I did not call the charter company. Instead, I made 2 calls from a burner phone I'd bought at the airport. The first was to a number I'd found for the Swiss Federal Office of Culture, Cultural Heritage Protection. I asked for the director, speaking in the calm, urgent French I'd painstakingly rehearsed. When I was connected to an assistant, I said, "I am in possession of 2 crates containing looted pre-Columbian artifacts smuggled into Zurich Freeport. I wish to surrender them and myself and provide evidence implicating the American family who arranged the shipment. My name is Mark Barlow. I am at the Hotel Ambassador. I will wait for your agents." The second call was to the FBI's tip line for art crime, routed through the U.S. Embassy. I gave the same information, adding my passport number. "I am turning myself in to Swiss authorities this morning. I request liaison with the FBI. I will provide full cooperation." Then I sat on the bed and waited. The knock came within 40 minutes. It was not subtle. 3 men in dark suits and 2 uniformed Swiss police officers. They were efficient, professional, and utterly grim. I showed them the crates. One of the suits, a man with a careful, impassive face named Herr Dr. Schneider, produced a small toolkit. With my permission, he carefully pried open one crate. Inside, nested in custom-cut gray foam, was a sculpture. It was a crouching figure of a jaguar carved from dark green stone, its surface intricately patterned. It was breathtakingly old, pulsing with a silent, stolen power. Even I could feel it. The air in the hotel room seemed to change. Schneider let out a soft breath, not of awe, but of profound gravity. He looked at me. This is a Maya piece from the Peten region. It has been missing for decades. Where are the export permits? There are none, I said, my voice steady. I was hired to smuggle these to Dubai. I am choosing to surrender them. I have a full statement prepared, with names, dates, and financial trails. I will give it to you and to the FBI in exchange for a plea agreement for immunity in Switzerland and the United States for these specific acts, contingent on my complete and continuing cooperation. A protective order for my brother and his business to be monitored by the FBI. My testimony will be sealed until indictments are unsealed. I will be released today, but I will remain under a form of house arrest in Switzerland until the initial phase of the investigation is complete. I cannot contact the Sterling family or their associates. I cannot return to the United States until we give the all clear. I signed without reading the fine print. It didn't matter. I had done it. The release was anticlimactic. I was given back my clothes, my passport, stamped with a temporary visa restricting my movement, and a cheap mobile phone. I was installed in a small, safe house apartment on the outskirts of Zurich, watched by a polite but firm Swiss police officer stationed outside. I was free, and yet utterly trapped. But I had a phone call. One call, monitored. I called Dave. It rang twice. Dave's auto. Dave? It's Mark. Mark? Where the hell are you? Dot's been going out of her mind. Said you were on a boat job, but that was days ago. She called the Coast Guard, for Christ's sake. The safe house in Zurich was a study in beige limbo. Time lost its shape, measured not in days, but in the comings and goings of my Swiss police minder, Officer Kohler, and the occasional taut visits from Eliane Martel. The world beyond the blinds, the orderly streets, the distant Alps, the efficient hum of a nation that prized discretion above all else, felt like a diorama. I was a specimen under glass, preserved for a future I could no longer imagine. The legal machinery ground on with a slow, implacable force. My immunity agreement was a fortress of legalese, but the foundation was my continued cooperation. I spent hours with sketch artists, describing Julian Thorne, Klaus, the interior of the Sterling Library. I pored over financial documents, tracing the hypothetical paths of the promised investment into Dave's business. I relived the dinner, the recording playing back in sterile conference rooms, my own voice sounding like a stranger's. Martel was my only conduit to the outside. The Americans are moving, she told me one afternoon, her briefcase snapping open with surgical precision. A grand jury has been convened in the Southern District of New York. Sealed indictments are being prepared for Robert, Diana, and Ava Sterling on charges of conspiracy to commit international antiquity smuggling, wire fraud, and blackmail. Interpol notices will follow. What about Julian Thorne, Klaus? Lower priority, useful for corroboration, but the target is the family, the architecture of the scheme. She gave me a look that was not unkind, but entirely professional. You have provided the blueprint. Now they are building the case. And my brother? A protective detail has been discreetly assigned. His business finances are being monitored for any anomalous activity. So far, nothing. The Sterlings appear to be unaware of the storm that is about to break over them. They believe you are in Dubai, completing the transaction. A ghost of a smile. Their arrogance is their vulnerability. Their arrogance. It was the fuel that had powered my gamble. But in the silence of my confinement, a new, chilling doubt began to whisper. Had I been arrogant too? Had I truly outmaneuvered Robert Sterling, a man who had spent a lifetime anticipating and neutralizing threats? The first crack in my fragile sense of control came not from the Sterlings, but from my own world. Officer Kohler, a man of few words and a perpetual slight frown, handed me a secure satellite phone one evening. A call for you, from the United States. Your lawyer has approved it. 5 minutes. It was Dave. His voice was stripped raw, a low rumble of pure anguish. Mark. Dave? What's wrong? Are you okay? Is it the shop? The shop's fine. It's Dot. The world tilted. What do you mean about Dot? She came by the shop 2 days ago, looked like hell, said she hadn't heard from you in over a week, that your calls went straight to voicemail, that your landlord said you'd paid up 3 months in advance and vanished. She thought you were dead, or that you'd left her. He took a shuddering breath. I tried, Mark. I tried to tell her you were okay, that it was some legal thing, that you'd explain. But she just looked at me, this look of total betrayal. She said, you used the boat story. You lied to my face. She left. Yesterday she cleared out her apartment, left her key with the super, quit her job at the diner. Gone. No forwarding address. Her phone's disconnected. The silence on the line was a roaring in my ears. I had protected Dave from the Sterlings, but I had failed to protect Dot from me, from my lies, my necessary, brutal secrecy. I had chosen the nuclear option to save one family, and in the blast radius, I had annihilated the future I had been fighting for. Dave, What did you do, Mark? His voice broke. What did you get into that was worth this? I had no answer that would make sense to him. The noble cause, the fight against corruption, it was ash in my mouth. All he could see was the wreckage, a brother turned ghost, a good woman shattered. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, the words utterly inadequate. The line went dead. My 5 minutes were up. That night, the silence of the safe house became a physical presence, a weight on my chest. I had traded my life for justice, but justice was an abstract, cold god. Dot's face, the crinkle of her eyes when she laughed, the solid warmth of her shoulder against mine, these were real, and I had sacrificed them on an altar I wasn't sure I even believed in anymore. Martell found me the next morning staring at a blank wall. She assessed my state with a clinical eye. "The psychological toll is expected. You must stay focused. The end game is approaching." "What's the point?" I heard myself say, my voice flat. "I stopped them, but they still took everything." "They did not take your integrity," she said sharply. "A luxury, perhaps, to think that way, but it is the only thing they could not purchase or destroy. You chose it. Remember that." But integrity felt like a cold, hard stone in a barren landscape. It didn't keep you warm at night. It didn't answer the phone. The storm broke 2 weeks later. Martell arrived, her usual composure crackling with a fierce energy. "It is done. The indictments are unsealed. Warrants issued. Interpol red notices for all 3. The news is breaking everywhere." She turned on the small television in the safe house. The sterile Swiss news was replaced by the frenetic energy of American cable news. A sleek news anchor stood in front of a stock photo of the Sterling townhouse. "Shocking fall of grace for one of New York's most prominent philanthropic families. Robert Sterling, his wife Diana, and their daughter Ava Sterling are wanted by federal authorities in connection with a massive international antiquity smuggling ring. Sources say the scheme unraveled when a would-be smuggler, reportedly a former associate of the family, turned himself in to Swiss authorities with a cache of looted artifacts and a stunning secret recording." My photo, an old one from my corporate days, flashed on the screen. I looked young, hopeful, naive, a stranger. Then footage shot on a chaotic New York street. Robert Sterling, stone-faced, flanked by his lawyers, moving through a scrum of reporters, a federal agent at his elbow. Diana, wearing oversized sunglasses, her head held high in a performance of wounded dignity. And Ava. They caught her trying to leave through a service entrance of the townhouse. She wasn't floating. She was stumbling, her perfect hair disheveled, her silver dress, a different one but the same species of armor, looking absurd in the harsh morning light. The serene mask was gone, shattered into a raw, animal panic. She tried to shield her face from the cameras, her eyes wide with a terror that was utterly, devastatingly real. She wasn't a beautiful void anymore. She was a cornered, frightened young woman facing the loss of her entire world. I felt no triumph, only a profound, weary sadness. She had built her life on a foundation of beautiful lies, and now the ground was giving way. Her uselessness hadn't protected her. It had made her an easy, perfect target. The news cycle devoured the story. The Sterling scandal had everything. Money, art, family betrayal, a secret recording. My name was everywhere. The mysterious former associate who had brought down a dynasty. Speculation ran wild. I was a jilted lover, a disgruntled employee, a righteous whistleblower. None of it mattered. I was a character in a story I no longer recognized. The extradition process began. The Sterlings fought, of course, with their battalion of high-priced lawyers, but the evidence, the artifacts, the recording, the financial trails, was a mountain. My sealed testimony was the capstone. I remained in Zurich, a ghost in the machine. The U.S. government, now my reluctant host, arranged for my eventual relocation to a new identity, somewhere in America, far from anyone I had ever known. Witness protection. The final erasure. The day before my scheduled clandestine flight to my new nowhere, I was granted a final, heavily supervised outing, not as a treat, but as a psychological pressure valve. Officer Kohler drove me to a quiet park overlooking the Zurich Sea. I could walk, within sight, breathe unfiltered air. I sat on a bench watching the orderly sailboats tilt in the breeze. The Alps were a crisp white postcard in the distance. It was a vision of peace I could no longer feel. A woman sat down on the far end of the bench. She was older, dressed in a simple, expensive linen shift. She wore large sunglasses. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it was Diana, but the posture was different, stiller, sadder. She didn't look at me. She spoke to the lake. She asked me to come. I knew the voice. It was older, wearier, stripped of its performative warmth and its cutting edge, but it was hers. "You shouldn't be here, Diana," I said, my eyes fixed ahead. Kohler was watching from the car, but he wouldn't recognize her. To him, she was just another elegant Zurich matron. "They've frozen everything. The house, the accounts. My facility has politely asked me to seek treatment elsewhere. Robert isn't speaking to anyone. His lawyers say